Hi, everyone. Trista McIver here, Program Advisor with AMC NPO Solutions. Today on the Strategic Nonprofit, we will be talking about how to develop e-learning for your not-for-profit, what things you should consider before implementation, and how it can be managed in the future. I've invited Gordon Shepherd on the podcast today. He is the president of Expert Training Solutions and helps association leaders to produce and promote online training for their staff, members, and volunteers. Gordon brings more than 25 years of experience as a consultant, trainer, facilitator, marketing, and communications advisor, along with a master's degree in business administration, a drama degree, and ProSheet change management certification. Welcome to the podcast, Gordon.
It's really great to be here. You said that 25 years and I got a jolt of remembering and waiting. I wasn't you didn't say I was 25. You said I had 25 years of experience. I'm like, yes, I do. And that's what's good and maybe not so good in other areas of my life as well. So thank you for that gracious introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And how are things going with you today?
Well, really good. It's a funny time, again, when I think about those 25 years and my kids, 19 and 17. And as I imagine my consulting evolution as I've gone along, I've done a lot of client work, obviously, but I think I may have learned more from them in the teenage years about how to be a consultant and really what to do from, just sort of being a dad, I think has been a great thing too. But it's nice. That experience piece has been good because when I reach back to kind of what got me here, to this time, and I was in educational television production in the early 90s, in mid 90s at TV Ontario in Ontario. And then I've worked at CBC Radio as well, producing, communications material there. And then did a big stretch in what I call the corporate world at Access Television in Alberta. And they're an education station as well. And, we were getting those educational videos out the door. And it was in the day when we dropped off a VHS tape for about, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on your desk and that kind of thing. So
such things.
I laugh because you never know who's listening. And then someone will say like, what's a VHS tape? I'm like, oh, okay, there's the 25 years. What's nice though, is that premise of helping people to produce great educational material has fast forwarded into this time when all the tools changed. And I was out of the TV business in 2012 and thankfully used this MBA to transition and learn organization strategy, and actually have worked as a consultant in strategy with a variety of organizations, in between there, and then been able to come to this period of these last couple of years where I'm helping leaders in nonprofit to really establish their e-learning programs in the right way that's going to be sustainable over time and really do what they want it to do and not be that kind of one-off thing that I think happens too often. People get excited about their e-learning. They want to maybe do a signature program. They get it produced and then they start to market, or they get started and they have to go back to the board again and again and again for more approvals about more dollars that are needed down the road. Having the full breadth of knowledge now to be able to come to them and say, okay, let's talk about everything up front and make sure that you know exactly what's about to happen in the next 3 to 5 years to be able to do that. And one of my favorite questions for association leaders especially is, and maybe your folks that are watching this right now can keep this in mind and listen, is what's the name of your university going to be? Your online school. And so if I had to ask about that for your organization, just for fun, and I don't know if you're the decision maker in this area or not, but for fun, what would you call the name of your organization's school?
Well, ours is actually called the NPO Academy. We already have it. Yeah.
You're ahead of the game. So the NPO Academy. So you can say immediately then, and you say it with confidence. So you've made that investment, right? You've done it. You're on the way. You're producing learning materials just like this. There's many organizations when I go to ask that question, if you can imagine yourselves back in, when you didn't know, they don't even have an answer. They kind of smile, they get giddy. And then I'm like, great. Once they come up with that name, NPO Academy, then we reverse engineer the whole process. So that, that's your 5-year vision. Great. Now we're going to go all the way back to this square one, wherever you're at. Let's start there and make sure you can get to NPO Academy. And you, of course, would know the amount of work that it takes to really get these things up and running.
Yeah, I personally don't know. That's done by our back end, but I do know that it is a lot of work. And so let's talk about, for example, say I'm an executive director. So in my past, I worked in early childhood. So for for me, I was a part of an association called Early Childhood Educators of BC. So we would need 40 hours of training to renew our license. So because because of what's going on in the world, there's not enough in-person trainings. So how, as an association leader myself for my organization, how would I go about starting this e-learning process?
What a great example, right? We hit these COVID days. I think things for many years, if I'm Chicken Little, screaming from the sky going, hey, get into your e-learning program. It's going to be great. And some organizations were proactive. Like, if you've got the academy and you got your thing and you understand what's going on, you're being proactive. Many aren't. Of the tens of thousands, certainly in Canada, they're just not. And so you just said it. We're doing live training. How do we now get to our online training? But I don't think you can rush this process, it is the honest answer. And so how do you get to it in a way that shows off your experts, drives revenue, does all the things that you want it to do going down the road? And it's been fun to be in the position where I think that first moment for the person that hasn't come up with the name of their school, in a sense, is to be able to say there is a way. It is going to take time. And it doesn't matter really if you don't have very much money. There's things to do these days. This is the great thing about this time. There's tools. There are ways to get this done. And of course, if you need to get up into those big budgets, you can as well. But if you don't have much money, you're going to spend a lot of your internal staff, resources, and time to get it done. And if you do have some money to invest, you can get that hybrid going out the door. And my hope for nonprofit leaders at this very early moment of, who do you talk to and where do you get the right advice, is I would say just a word of caution is they're often talking to one contractor at a time. So they're going to be, talking to their web developer and say, do you know an e-learning person? Or, I got to get this stuff up and running. And maybe the web developer knows, or maybe they don't, or maybe they got a marketing, somebody either internal or external. What do you think about this? There isn't actually sort of someone in this situation often to pull it all together. And that's where I find myself with all this combined experience these days, is being able to walk beside that executive director that you described, be what I call Yoda on their shoulder, to be able to just sort of walk with them and say, where do we start? What's your starting point? And be able to move that forward. So in your case, if we were going to sort of take it a little further as an example, you would say, well, what sort of budget, time and resources do you have available? And one of the quick questions that comes up is, do you have internal staff resources? Now, obviously, I guess you folks do have internal support, for example, right?
Yeah.
And when you've got that internal support, that's great. But I had one client, for example, they said, well, Gord, I paid for the editing software. How come my assistant can't edit yet? And I was like, wait a minute, they're going to need 100 hours to learn how to edit. Like, just think about our own process with Zoom. How long did it take you to get up and running and get the background right and work on all those things? These things just take time. So if you've got lots of money, you can pour it on contractor resources to come in and kind of move things faster. But that may not be the best solution, because if your plan over time is to do material that's going to really be lasting, then you want to be able to have the right people in place for the right pieces. And so much of, even your experience, when you're talking about this early childhood education, sometimes you need a 5-module course with 50 lessons. Sometimes you just need to learn the latest topic on curriculum development, let's just say, for that area. So now as an executive director, you now have to think, well, okay, so what types of materials do I need to get out? And this is really starts to get back to this upfront conversation of like, what do you really want to do? And ultimately for me, from my perspective, is it going to move your organizational strategy forward? And that's where I start to get super excited, because if we can move that forward, then we know we're in the right lane.
Absolutely. And, I just had a thought about certification. So also the courses, so some of the courses say would be free, and some you would it would be a module where you'd have to pay, pay for it and go like you would to like a night school course type of thing. And I guess per se with the early childhood educators, you'd have to see if this could be accredited to that, like the certification of it, right? So there's lots of things. There's a
zillion moving parts. I know we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the process that I bring to situations. Yeah. It's a 5-step process that I'm able to say responsibly now. I get to sleep well at night because it's an honest thing of not trying to oversell it. You don't just sort of come in and go, yeah, you can get something up and running in 3 weeks and it's going to last for 10 years. it's not true in terms of how you need to pull everything together. So by developing kind of steps for people to follow, it gives them an initial feeling of kind of what they need to get going. And underneath there, I can say, and I won't, sort of frighten people, but there's a 25-page checklist underneath the 5 steps that you want to be able to have organizationally. You want to plan to absorb that into your organization. And I'll start talking about some of the details over about a year to a year and a half period. So these executive directors who are already busy, they're already focused on what they're focused on, their main issues. This is another way to then say, okay, oh, wait, there's a manageable way to do this right. And if we get it right, we know it's going to last a long time. And again, I hope that's a good way for organizations to go forward.
Yeah, so exactly. So it seems like, why reinvent the wheel, right? I mean, it seems you already have, what is this 5-step process?
Yeah, so for me, the 5 steps are sort of 5 P's to make it kind of, easy to remember. The first step is plan. The second step is prove. The third step is promote. Number 4 is produce. And finally, perform. And so ultimately, I hope for leaders that are taking this in, they're going to spend a lot of time at the planning step until they're almost bored of planning. Like it has to be that exhaustive, because if you don't, you get down the road and you miss something. You'll miss a little thing like, oh, we forgot to check photo rights, or do we have our privacy policy worked out? These things that it's not on their minds, and that shouldn't be really. They should get the help in that they need to get these things done. But if they spend a lot of time at the planning phase, then what you do is you plan for all the 5 steps. And if you can at least have the high level that you as the executive director need, and you understand it, and then you know that the people are in place to pull it off, then you've got a good chance to kind of go forward. And so it's fun to sort of step into the first step, which is plan. And in that step, I always talk about, do you have, again, the budget, time, people, and resources? We've talked about that a little bit. But when I get back even further and I say, does this drive your key goals? And for most associations, one of their key goals is to be the voice of their industry. And that's almost guaranteed top 2 every time we talk about association work. So we know they are the voice of the industry. We know that education and outreach is part of their mandate. Now, they're doing it traditionally, right? They're doing it in their conferences, and they're doing it in, some of their live training as well. How do they then make sure they get all the pieces in place to go forward? So if we know that we're driving that key goal of being the voice of the industry, then we're in the right lane and we're good to go. We've identified the resources and these things. The budgeting piece that I really like talking about with people is, how much money do you need in total over the 3 to 5 year period to make your program really go, so that you can go to the board once and be able to say, you know what, here's the number that we need to bite off. But the thing that's killing organizations from a momentum point of view is they say, well, let's start with the website. Let's then go and get a learning management system where we're going to upload all the courses and then we'll have it there. And then we'll talk about digital marketing. And they do it in piecemeal without having made the plan. And they're going back 2 and 3 and 4 times. And if you're lucky, you've got a board that can guide all this, and that's great. Quite often they don't. And so you're finding yourself down the road losing traction. And again, I mentioned earlier on, they get excited about the content and they get that content produced. But because they haven't done a promotion plan, then they start promoting. Then they start finding out if their students or staff or whoever, their members, are going to use it. And it doesn't make sense to not sort of do it sort of in order, if that makes sense as well. So if we can get these budget numbers fully realized at that front end in the planning phase, then they're going to be in great shape. Go to the board once, the board knows what's happening. They're working on this over time. Then it's not to say that you need to bite off the whole plan right away. You can start at $0. And the neat thing these days is we're on a call, you're recording the call. You can get a lot of this done for next to nothing and people hours, and get pretty decent material out the door to test your ideas. And I say test because that's the second step, right? Have you ever had that moment where you put a big thing out and the uptake just wasn't what you thought?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
right? Yeah.
You're excited, right? Let's write a book. Let's do this whole thing, but you haven't market tested it yet. So if we can draw from the business literature around startup mentality, right? The validation idea that I get into pretty quickly, and I'll leave this sort of there's lots you can do in validation, but I'm looking for a 30-day sprint. So let's just say in early childhood education, you want to put together an accredited course. It's going to be 5 modules, 50 lessons, accredited. That's the big deal. You want to bite that off.
Yeah.
Before you do that, please make sure that somebody wants it. And here's what I'm going to suggest. Write an article that describes the course in about 1,500 words, 1,000, 1,500 words, right? In there, you got why does a student want to take it? What's it going to be all about? Introductory paragraph. What are the basic module headers that are going to be in there? Get all that together. And then what's the impact? What is the transformation that the student's going to go through by the time they get through the end of this course? Well, you'll be accredited. Then you'll have the ability to go and earn a living. Great. That's a great course that you could have in early childhood education. What's the smallest piece of that then that you can then bite off, record on your camera on a Zoom call like this to create a 5-minute video? So now we've got 2 assets built. Those things are done in about 2 weeks. You've got a blog article that describes the course. You've got a 5-minute video. You recorded it on with your phone or maybe on a Zoom call like this. Now you go and you find, I'll say, 6 members that you want to sell it to. Hopefully they're not all friendly. Please do not go get your mom and whatever, all these people that are going to say nice things about you. You want to get some people who are going to challenge it. And they read through the article and you just see if they get it. And they see this little piece from your subject matter expert. You've got a teacher there. They teach this little piece and they're going to say, that's great. Go forward. Have a blast. Or they're going to say what starts to happen. I don't like online courses, or I wouldn't use that, or the material's off. That is a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift. So you let your ego go and you go, okay, we got some real feedback here. We're going back to the drawing board. That's great. And you've only invested 2 weeks of your time, 3 weeks of your time to get this feedback. Do that 2 and 3 times and really dial in the content. So then you know you're going somewhere. Then you know they're going to complete the course and do that along the way. There's lots to talk about invalidation, but that really is the crux of the matter. Get something small done. Could be, whatever you think small is. Get it out to real people and then get on the phone and just talk to them and say, what's going on? And they'll give you the feedback. So often we get excited in what we're doing and we're sitting around the table and like, it's going to be great. And I think a lot of people are going to use it. And then it goes out to crickets. Those a lot of investment being made in corporate video communication, for example, it goes on YouTube. We got 8 views and it's like, you wanted 10,000, how can you get it to there? I think that's the level we want to get it to.
Right. Oh, that was great, Gordon. Thank you. Can you, what's the next step?
Yeah, so this leads us into step number 3, right? So now we've done our plan. We've got a validation little piece that people are actually biting into, and they really understand that there's going to be an audience for it. Their members are going to get really excited about the material. The next step is promote. And this is this idea of coming up with a marketing campaign. I don't mean to make that sound overwhelming. It might be as simple as picking up the phone and finding your first 100 students on the phone. That actually is a really good technique. A lot of people are overly reliant these days on digital marketing. I'm just going to slam it on Facebook or whatever, and people are going to love it. I think that's very difficult to do, especially if don't have a lot of experience in that area. And when I'm talking about promotion, I always start in and say, what can you do for free? So what have you already got successful out there in the social media space, and how can you test imagery, that type of thing, and get it going? And then finally, there's this idea of getting paid digital marketing, depending on what that is. And it could be billboards or magazine ads or whatever you're going to do. But really, before you get there, you want to really have things worked out in your messaging as you're going forward. I'm not sort of a super deep marketer. This is that moment where I was saying I would actually refer that moment out if you're going for a big paid campaign to someone who's super experienced in the digital marketing and marketing space. So again, I'm kind of Yoda helping to oversee, and this is a member of the team. And hopefully you've got this person internally and they can guide things forward. And then now you got this promotion thing started. Well, finally they're chomping at the bit. They've gotten validation. Students, some people are out there are already excited about the course. You start to actually build the course, right? And you would have been around this if you're an educator, right? Is it easy to write course curriculums? Right?
No. For 3 to 5-year-olds? No, absolutely not. Infants is even more challenging.
Right? So but you got to do that. You actually got to get that curriculum up. Now, the nice thing is you're going to write your curriculum. Well, you've already written that blog article. So you already got a framework for what's going on, right? So that's the sneaky part there. You've got that curriculum. You have to write the course. The big warning here, big whatever asterisk we can put up on the graphics if we had some, is people underestimate how long courses take to write. And it's just the reality of actually getting it from talking. The ones that associations that are rushing too much is they'll get someone at the front of a room. They're talking with slides. They record it for 2 hours. They cut it up in 3 pieces as a real story. And then they send it out to people and nobody watches it because it's not edited. It's not sort of enjoyable to watch. And it really doesn't reflect the material very well. It would if you were in the room at live, but it doesn't work very well. So you got to write it. that can take on a minimum, I'm just going to say 100 hours. Now, I say that and people's eyes bug out because they're like, what do you mean 100 hours? But you really have to start thinking in those amounts. And for a signature course that we're talking about accreditation wise, you're looking at getting your subject matter experts. There might be 1, 2, 3 of them involved. You're looking at about 300 hours and that's going to take place in a rush over probably 6 months, but comfortably that takes place over a longer period of time. So this is always getting back to the planning. What do we want to do? What's it going to take? And when you start to get into those number of hours for those types of people you have to pay the money to, the budgets are going up and up and up. And are you ready? And how are you going to pay for it? And that has to be a big thing as well. Write the curriculum. There's the outline. Now you've written the course. Somewhere in there, you're going to need a slide deck. So that has to be developed, right? And if you've got some graphic people in-house, that's terrific. Then you have to shoot and edit. And here we are. We're shooting. We're recording, we're doing the thing. You have to learn how to do this in a way that it looks, I'm going to say solid for your organization. If it takes it up another level, you can get into some very sophisticated, production, obviously. But obviously, you want our talking heads and people to look good and sound great. Finally, you want to get those pieces, they come out as videos, really, and they get loaded up into what's called a learning management system. So again, it's a little acronym that folks are, they hear early on and they're intimidated by it. Certainly this executive director that we're talking about, it's called an LMS. Now, what I can tell you is there's free solutions, which I think you should actually play with a little bit, upload something into the free system, see how that feels, see how students interact with it. And it is possible, it's very manageable to do that. And then you can actually get some pieces that are off the shelf and you kind of pay month over month for what those might be. And of course you can go custom, right? And custom can be really valuable for, this idea when you're in a larger organization. The budgets are certainly at that more significant level, but there's a lot riding on it. You're going to see, you're talking about engineering, medical. This is where your larger associations are going to tackle that type of platform. So what I'm able to do is help coach people through what system do you need? And again, it doesn't matter to me about what it is. It's what's the appropriate solution for the situation. So now you've gone through the first 4 steps. You planned, you proved it out. You've got some people that are chomping at the bit to get it. You've got a little promotion plan started at least, and you know where to get help for promotion. You've gone into this production phase. You figured out, can we have somebody do it in-house with editing, or no, we got to hire somebody, but we know who it is, and that's really good. And finally, we're on to the 5th step, the final step, because you got it up and running. It's been successful. You're starting now to measure how many students took the course, how did they stay with it, did they actually learn something, which is really important. And you've budgeted for that phase around this idea of when something breaks, because it just breaks. It just does. It's, how are we going to be in our customer service for the people that really need to get this? What's that going to look like? And finally, how are we going to pay for all of our systems, our learning management system, essentially going forward? Do we have the right budget for it? So those are the 5 steps. And I hope that gives people an overview of really what's necessary. And it's exciting, again, for me to be an integrator ultimately for everything, to allow people to get the answers they need quickly. Or if they're going to do their own research around learning management systems, around providers of contractors for any of these elements, just be prepared to take the time to do that, because that's really, really important as well. So budgeting time, if you're going to do it on your own, that's great. Get in some help, that's great. And make sure that you've got everybody in the situation aware of what it's really going to take. And I get super excited because I know the vision down the road. I've seen the school name. I know what it can do. It can start to be a revenue driver, right? And now what are we hearing about live events in COVID times? Live events, people are scrambling. It used to be a big revenue generator once a year for many associations. Now that's fallen through the floor, and that's really brutal for them. So how can they start to get other revenue? Well, the courses, I don't know if people can charge for them. Maybe they can test that. They may be able to put a logo on the end of an online course. And maybe that's something that really works into their sponsorship packages that starts to help them drive the revenue that they need. Ultimately, these courses can be really used for new member signups, because members are questioning all the time, what is the value of my membership? Well, if this enhancement comes in, it gets them their PD hours or whatever it is, it gets them really some good education that gets them excited. I think that's really good too. And you pulled the ripcord here, so I could talk honestly for a long, long time about just how excited I am to deliver, this material and this advice in this format. And again, once I start, getting off the consultative piece, it's great to get into the project management mode and help people along. But I hope people take this forward. I hope they're able to get the resource. And then when I think about your organization, I'm like a little piece of the pie that then, because you folks are in at the strategy level and that whole picture level, it's nice to then work and collaborate with organizations like yours, because then it all starts to go together in the right way.
Perfect. Yeah, so you mentioned about an association, I guess, that you worked or that you heard of that had a course already, and then they did their video recordings. Now I know with ECEBC and many of the other organizations that work with early childhood educators as well, they already have the in-person. So they have the coursework already. They have, the content, all that stuff. So what you're saying is awesome. It's great for an organization that doesn't have any of that. So I guess for them, I'm just talking because there's probably a lot of associations that have all this amazing content. They just haven't been able to or put it online quite yet. So that's another step. So you may not need as much of the steps that you're talking about per se, but if they have the content already, then they're ahead of the game, right?
I think so too. And the idea is, where are you at in the process? So have you already done what you folks are doing? We know the name of our school, we're up and running, we produce material, it's part of our regular flow, we know it drives our business. That's great. If they're at that point where they've got just a big pile of opportunity, the quick thing I would say that folks, they hear it, it's agonizing to hear. Just do an inventory of what your current inventory is, and then find out which stuff is reusable. And you have to actually go through that process. So then there you're at there. And I'm gonna suggest that many organizations that are in that moment where they've got lots of content haven't thought deeply about the marketing. So somewhere in there, they're in they've validated, just like you said, they've done some planning, they've done the validation, they know it's going to work, but then how do they get it organized? And then how do they get it done in the right way with an outside opinion? I always say I'm not in the family when I'm working with people. And how do you know the temptation is there to deliver all of it? You've got to have all these things. And for online education, that's a killer. I had a consultant I talked to recently. She's like, I have these 9 1-hour pieces about, I think it was leadership and strategy. I was like, great. How can you get that down to something that people are actually going to watch and absorb? Because in terms of actually getting someone to watch 9 hours of anything online these days, very, very difficult. So I love where you're going. They've got great content. How do you prioritize which piece of content is going to be most successful for the right people, which is really understanding your audience is an important question. And then, they get it back into that pipeline of production and actually start to get those things out the door. And so I get, again, excited about entering at that phase because, what have they already put in time and resources? What was their return on investment so far? And is it going to be worth going forward? Or should they just put a bullet in it and stop? Those are great questions from certainly an outsider, and it gets away from, we're in love with our content, it's going to be great, that kind of thing, and gets back to who's going to use it, how much are they going to use it, and is it going to drive, again, your key objectives?
Yeah, exactly. So what advice would you give for association leaders in regards to budgeting, having future maintenance of the e-learning on their own?
Yeah, the big piece about budgeting is do enough homework up front to get a big number, so that you don't get bamboozled. Like I had a client who got a quote from an e-learning provider, and they said they'd do their course for like $1,000. And I'm like, it's just not going to be a great course. Immediately a provider providing at that level, you can't deliver value not for an association at that level. So immediately you're into at least some thousands for a small association, but really quickly up into the low tens of thousands over time. Like I'm not saying that you have to spend it right now, but you're going to identify those things. And it's either going to come from the number of hours you have to pay somebody internally. So there's going to take them 6 months out of their salary or whatever that is, or it's going to be external, contractors that you're going to work with. And you've got to kind of just deal with that. Hopefully you've got, again, some guidance from the board level, or you can bring in somebody from the outside to give you a reflection on that. Can't say enough about that. Don't underestimate the amount of time it takes to write the course. So don't get overly excited and say, wow, I really want to get this course up and running in 90 days, and then be disappointed when that doesn't happen. There's just things that have to go with translating from your best people into what's going to really serve your members at a high level. So I think that's another big piece I would advise, sort of on those pieces as well. And be patient with just your own emotional reactions to these numbers that come up, to the amounts of time that come up. Because I think for busy executive directors, busy education committees that are on, subbing to the board or whatever it is, they just, when these numbers, like, oh, it's going to take 100 hours or 200 hours, it's going to cost $100,000, whatever those numbers are that you kind of crunch down to, doing that upfront planning work is worthwhile. Get through kind of okay, now we understand what that is. We're not ready this year to do that. So now you know it's a no-go. That's actually a really valuable part of the exercise. But don't get caught in between those expectations where you're doing something before you know that it's going to get fully delivered. There's a graveyard of online courses, right? Things that just never got used. They got built, they never got used. They're just sitting out there. It's, I don't know, tons of them. And don't let that happen to yours, is what I would say.
Thank you. That's great advice. Thanks. So was there anything that I missed? Anything else that you'd like to share?
It's really, really good. I would just say, if you get a chance to have a thorough process, to, like the 5 steps that I have, or maybe some people already have like a project manager they're dealing with, and, those are good processes as well. They can get in place. I would just say, have a process and make sure you sort of diligently follow along with it, and don't underestimate the amount of time, again, that it takes to plan. Good 10, 15, 20 hours of working with the right people to get it kind of in a zone where you can then start to think about proceeding is a really great thing. And don't get caught out by individual contractors who get excited. So the web provider, the digital marketer, they're excited. They want to do their work, and that's great. But having an integrated way to think, I think, is the best way, in my opinion anyway, for these programs to be successful over a long period of time. And you're certainly going to, for any membership-driven organization these days, back to that whole thing of member value, that's the critical piece that you got to go forward. So this bolts in if you get it right, and that'll really drive that going forward.
Absolutely. Member value is the biggest thing. And that's exactly what we've been doing too as AMC. And it's been really great during this time to help people out that way. Well, thank you.
And it's nice to work. It's nice to be on a podcast with another organization that holds those values up, right? Where that's the driver, right? That's the important piece. Then you're not going to get caught up and just do really work that's not going to achieve your goals. So helping people to achieve their goals, it's just super exciting. And again, meeting other great people that are doing it too. It just makes for an easy conversation.
Sure does. Thanks for joining me today.
It's been great to be on the show. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Have a good day. Bye. Yes, that was a great conversation that I had today with Gordon Shepherd. And check out our e-learning on npoacademy.com. Thank you. Everything look in my background. Oh, right. Okay, so I'm going to sorry, I talk when I do things.
That's okay. And one time where my dog, honestly, I was on a moment like this. My little dog was right here off camera, and he just went nuts, and I froze. And then I had to take a minute to kind of just go like this, and then we went and we did so what are you going to do, right?
I just don't understand what is going on here. Ugh. Sometimes I hate computers. Oh, there we go.